Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being patient as we're getting started. We want to welcome everyone to our Prevention Care Network webinar. Give everyone a chance to see what we're about today. A couple of just housekeeping things. Their webinar is being recorded and it will be uploaded and sent out to everyone afterwards. So if you have to jump off for any reason, we know that our new coworkers can sometimes need our attention. So you can expand your audio for call-in information. So if you're having trouble hearing on your computer, know that you can always call in and then just type a code that'll be on your prompt so that you can join. If you don't want to be on video, you are welcome to disable your video. And if you do choose to be on video, just know that that will be recorded for posterity. If you're wondering who else is in here, you can always click on participants and see who all the participants are. You can also type questions and comments in the chat and speak to, you want to send it to the host or to anyone else who's here, please feel free to do so. And if you need to leave the meeting, you can just click the button for leaving the meeting, and look forward to having all of you participate today. Yay, more people are joining us on camera. That makes me happy. So we're going to get started with our opening circle and doing some introductions for anyone who I have not met. I am Miranda Stiers. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. And I am the Capacity Building Program Specialist for the California Partnership to End Domestic Violence. Today we're going to be talking about some of those community-centered prevention adaptations during COVID-19. I know that folks have made a lot of adjustments in how they're doing their work, so can't wait to hear from folks on what that looks like. We have some folks joining us from Laura's house in Orange County and also from SAVE in Fremont. We're going to have some time for questions and answers, and definitely want to hear what's working and what's not, and where some of those challenges have been for everyone here. So we'll get started with our opening circle. Folks can either type it into the chat or you can unmute and introduce yourself. Looking for a name, agency, and where everyone is joining us from. Good morning from Valley Crisis Center. Welcome Holly and Kelly. And Carolyn from Alliance for Community Transformation. Jacqueline from the Crisis Center in Fresno. Anna from the Center for Pacific Asian Family in Los Angeles. I hit send all the time. We've got folks from RISE, WRC in Oceanside. Welcome, Jess. Karen from the Strong-Hearted Native Women's Coalition in San Diego. All right, we have a really great spread of folks. One thing I want to let folks know, if you have signed up for our communities of practice, show of hands if folks have. We are going to get started on those. We will have some introductory webinars coming next week, and emails, keep an eye out for an email with all of the details on that. So we'll be holding it Wednesday, June 3rd from 3 to 4, and we'll have another opportunity for folks on Friday, June 5th from 1 to 2. You don't have to remember those dates. I will put them into the chat, and know that an email inviting you into that will come very soon. Welcome, Maya. All right. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Yanira and Andrew. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Hi there. Can you all see my screen? Yeah, the sizing's okay.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. We are really excited to be here with you all today to kind of just talk about how we've been modifying our services and programs specifically with our prevention work. We understand that everything's very different right now and really just depends on your community and what those needs are at this time right now. And so that's kind of what we're going to go through. We're going to go through how we first started adjusting to this, and then how we've modified and changed things along the way, and how we're still modifying our things. Because at the end of the day, this is what it is adapting to the ever-changing needs of our community. And so we'll start off kind of with the history of how we started. We were actually really fortunate that through our history, I guess our history of COVID and our prevention work with COVID. But we'll begin kind of with where we started and how we had to adjust immediately. But we were fortunate that we had actually a 40-hour training right before everything shut down. So Andrew's going to talk a little bit more about how that went and how we're continuing.
So the dreaded time of mid-March. So, obviously as we started to get the news of, how really like serious and just how scary that time was, we were in the midst, right? That week was actually going to be the start of our 40-hour training. So it was immediately like, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to start going about this? And we had like days. It really is when to ultimately plan out how we were going to do it. So we figured that it would be, the easiest to transition into an online platform, just to make sure that our staff and that our speakers and our participants were going to to be safe. We wanted them to make sure that, that they weren't going to be exposed. So again, like I mentioned, so like you see here, the training was scheduled for March 13th, and then we explored the options and logistics on March 10th. And then we made the announcement to, our participants and our speakers on March 11th, just to try to scramble around and try to plan all of it out. Luckily, Zoom at that point was, a really good and easy kind of, with the controls, obviously, with sharing the host privileges on the platform, made it easy to transition. And right now we're actually going through another training. So I'm actually coordinating that this upcoming July one. And so some of the things that we noticed or that have been helpful anyway was the what's the word that I'm looking for? Just like the capacity to have as many participants as the platform allows. So normally, because of limitations and capacity for like rooms that we had with one of our partnerships, that we would have our trainings at Saddleback College, and obviously there's a room capacity there. So one of the positives that kind of came out of the transition to an online platform was the ability to have more people taking our training, which is something that has been helpful for us, and something that's been super exciting, just seeing also that folks from across the United States were able to now take this training, or even folks that were still in California but maybe in other counties further away, more in like North California. The accessibility in that aspect has been super great to notice. So that's just super exciting to see, folks that are like registering, and to see folks from different states. It's super fun. And, to be able to reach certain people that may not have been able to access our services, or even access like our training at, because of obvious limitations of, not being able to be present in the actual space. So that's something that has been a real positive. But yeah, so our 40-hour training was kind of like our guinea pig, and how we were going to really transition all of our services to like an online platform. Yeah.
So yeah, we were really fortunate again to have that in the beginning to kind of prep us. At least our department was prepped in terms of that transition, and we were really able to continue to even assist other folks that were exploring that Zoom option within other departments. Not to say that there weren't any obvious challenges that came into play. Our state went into shutdown the week after, basically. And so after that was kind of like the obvious challenges that came up were technical difficulties. We thought we knew Zoom, but there was so much more with Zoom than we anticipated. And so just exploring that and exploring other online platforms specifically for other departments that felt safer for them. Exploring community needs. How do you connect with community when community is in isolation too? And so really breaking down those obvious barriers is reaching out to folks and seeing what our community needs are at the moment. And then we've explored even with those challenges that other challenges arise, and lots of lessons learned through that. Connecting with students, again, how do you connect with students if even schools are having difficulties doing that? And it makes sense, right? We're at a time where maybe even being in this presentation isn't a priority. And so just understanding that and really meeting people where they are. The presentation request. We are used to doing pretty high volumes of prevention education work. For instance, for last year alone, we reached over 15,000 students. And usually that's broken down between fall semester and spring semester. And here we are with the challenge of that's not going to happen this semester. So what are we going to do about it? And so again, we had to adapt and pivot quickly when it came to this, but it definitely allowed us for room to grow as a department and as an agency. Andrew, would you like to speak on other challenges that came up for you?
So no, just pretty much like what you mentioned, but just like specific stories, I guess, just like the classic Zoom bombing. That was fun. And it was funny because, I heard from, from the teacher that would book us, like, so we would still get teachers that would book us for presentations, and they said, oh, just so you know, like, this has been going on. And since this was like the first, I think at this point, like the first presentation that I was giving online for our healthy relationships curriculum. And there was since it was my first time getting the controls, I was like seeing people trying to join the class. I'm like, oh, obviously these are students, right? So I'm just like accepting folks because I had the controls, and I was like, oh, don't want to bother the teacher. And then sure enough, like I ended up allowing a Zoom bomber in, and that was fun. So just kind of like rolling with the difficulties, going through the different barriers, or the hurdles that were coming up. But yeah, essentially.
There were definitely a lot that came through it, specifically with logistics and how we navigated that. And so with all these challenges coming up, all these just different obstacles that kept coming up, I think for all of us, we had to just slow it down, press pause, and really come back to really what prevention means, what our advocacy work means. So we really had to come down to our foundation and then build from there.
So the first one obviously was visibility. That was something that was super important to us. We wanted to make sure that clients and just the community knew that we were still offering services. And this is something that has been super hard, especially when people would assume, because we're no longer like working from the office, that they think, okay, well, they're not open, you know what I mean? So it was just making sure that all of our that our services are still accessible, right? And in some ways it could even have been, it's a little bit more accessible now, because there's no really need to go to the actual physical space. So in some ways it's it's accessible to some and inaccessible to some others, right? So it's just a matter of really determining how we can be as accessible as possible. So one of the ways that we kind of we shifted some of our current platforms. So for example, we have this online, or this we have a chat line where folks can text the number and get connected with services. Now that service was from our department. That was something that we really pioneered that to really kind of make it so it's easier for our teens to get connected with an advocate or get connected with services. So that was something that was specific for teens, but just going through or noticing that a lot of people are trying to find ways to get connected, because some folks are like we know are trapped with their abusive partner. So we wanted to make sure that this is something that they can do, like something as simple as texting with an advocate that in that capacity, right? Obviously wanted to make sure that all of our services were being safe, not just obviously for our participants, but also our staff. So, just shifting all of the, making sure that we're offering our services, via telehealth, or other platforms, to make sure that we're still connecting with our clients with different services. And then the making sure that we're still connecting with our clients, and still connecting with the community. So specifically with our department, making sure that, because obviously that us as preventionists, we're so used to, being out in the community and like giving presentations and being the face of the agency. And it's just, looking a lot different because I've shared this with Miranda in a meeting as well, how it's like, it's different. It's kind of, it still feels like you're talking to a screen, and not always seeing faces from people in the audience or people that are viewing. So and we'll talk about this again later, but just something that I felt a lot of connection with is having recurring presentations. So normally, like Yanira mentioned, we would have people who would request presentations from us, like predominantly from schools. And so we would go in. Now, since obviously that is not where we're getting most of our views now, we wanted to figure out how we can still have that visibility, be accessible, right? Making sure that we're safe and still connecting. So really lifting that burden from teachers, lifting that burden from students, and to build that community, because that's so important, and having recurring presentations weekly to make sure that folks can join us, and then they know that there's going to be a presentation at that given time with a different topic, and that's just kind of how we wanted to make sure that the foundation of our department was still present.
So lots of lessons learned throughout all this, and we continue to learn. First off, we have to make it personal. We're used to kind of using constant contact, doing email blasts and sending that to everyone. And when we're talking about presentation requests, we realized that that wasn't what people needed. So we had to go one-on-one, saying, hey, I hope you're doing well. I hope you and your family are safe. Just wanted to check in with you and tell you all about, these presentations. If you're interested in hopping onto one of these webinars, or if you know anyone that would benefit from it, just please let me know. And making that personal just connection with someone really helped in bringing people into our webinars and talking with us. Adaptability. We thought we were adaptable and flexible, but this really put us on a whole new level. We had to genuinely meet people where they are and make our education current. For instance, we talk about bystander effect, but what does bystander mean in COVID? So things like that, and really, again, people were talking about this and wanted more information, and really catering our education to that was important. And also doing things that would make people feel safer. For instance, we have a pretty large outreach event called Festival of the Hearts, and we decided to do that virtually now, again, so that people feel safer, especially if this event is used to having large groups of people, making it safe and being it online instead. We have a healthy families curriculum where we talk about education, but with families, and how to provide proper support there, again, doing all this online. And then asking ourselves, are we being intentional when responding to our community needs? And then communication, obviously very important, ongoing communication with schools and receiving updates, how everyone's doing. And we realized how much support we need from everyone, really. And it was important to rely on community partnerships, talk and check in with one another, see how we're doing, and also discuss what works and what doesn't work to kind of just help each other out. And so there was a lot of guidance and support that came from it. And then we realized that we were redefining professionalism as a whole. And then with that, there was increased empathy. For instance, for our 40-hour training, we were still figuring it out, and our participants were extremely just understanding of the entire process. And even now, when we talk about like having these Zoom conversations or online platform conversations, we don't know what's going to happen. I don't know when my neighbor's dog is going to start barking, and so just because it's going to happen, I was really afraid of that right now. But things like that happen, and there's increased empathy in that, because we all understand that we're all in this really together, and we're facing through this together, and we're all adjusting as one. And so really just figuring those things out, and we realized how much empathy there was there. And then shifting away from numbers. As I mentioned, we're used to pretty large volumes, and then here we are thinking that doesn't matter. Are we genuinely connecting with people? That's what matters. And so it's taking it into a whole new perspective too, and that was agency wide, and it was nice to hear that. It was nice to hear that pressure wasn't necessarily there all the time either. I think we all get caught up in numbers, and then this really helped us reevaluate a lot of our work and take a step back. And then also a lot of cross-team collaboration. I think that's been really neat to see. We realized that we all share this common thread of education. With our therapists, when they connect with clients, right, they talk about tools, and that's education. With our legal advocates, when they help guide through the restraining order process, that's all education. What we do, that's education. And so we really realize that we share that common theme, that common thread, and with that we're able to connect with our community in a deeper way, and connect with ourselves in a deeper way, and connect with each other. And so that really was such a I don't think any of us expected that to happen, to see all that cross collaboration, but it really was something that we all truly value and want to continue doing that as the agency, as we all continue with our work. So those are just some lessons learned. I know that there's a lot that comes to it, and we're still adjusting when it comes to this. But we appreciate you all for really being in this with us. I know when you talk about connecting with other folks, this has definitely been a platform for all of us through these webinars to continue learning from each other.
Thank you. And if folks have questions, you can either unmute and ask your question or through chat.
We also have our emails up there too, if anyone comes up with questions later.
So a question that came in is, what were strategies used to work with the challenge of how to explore the community needs when the community is isolated too?
That kind of goes back to meeting people where they are. We realized that, there wasn't much communication when it came to it. So instead, that's kind of where our online webinars took place, where as departments, we're like, okay, what are some common things that come up? What are some issues or questions that come up for each department? And then that's where really they were able to form that type of information on their own, and then putting that on weekly webinars. So those weekly webinars really helped, and we didn't know really, we just kind of like threw it out there. Maybe a conversation in regards to immigration will be helpful, and we'll do it in English and in Spanish, and we'll see if something sticks. And so that helped, but also reaching out to other agencies, kind of seeing what concerns and challenges were coming up for them, or what kind of questions were coming up for other agencies that maybe we could address.
And to add on to just something that I've noticed, just with even because thinking in even like a micro scale, and just how the online platform, or how we are offering these webinars like online on a weekly basis, that was kind of like a sense of building community as well. Just seeing the folks that would like show up again, right, to learn new information, and folks that would connect online. Even when I join other webinars with with series and whatnot, like there's the same folks that are joining each and every time. And I think this, especially with what's going on now, it really is emphasizing how we should be focusing and shifting kind of more so on this aspect of community care and what that looks like, right? And obviously not community care is at the end of the day another form of self-care, right? Because when we're looking out for one another, when we're looking out for our community, checking in with friends and family members, and even just making sure that everyone's okay, right? That's still building that connection, right? Because right now we're longing for that. We're longing for the ability to connect on a personal level, to be in person with someone, and we can ultimately kind of relate in that way. We can acknowledge the pain and the loneliness that we're all experiencing together. And so I feel like, just especially with what's going on now, hopefully this allows for folks, like what was mentioning earlier, to build on that empathy, for us to build even a stronger community once we start having the ability to reopen and being able to present for our participants again.
And one question, that's a great strategy, Yanira. I love the idea of partnering with other agencies. Can you share what types of orgs you collaborated with?
Yes. So specifically, we have ongoing partnerships that have kind of been going anyway. So for instance, we have a partnership with Waymakers, which is our local rape crisis center. You may have seen in past webinars that we've had educators from that agency come on here. So for instance, we partnered with them for our Festival of the Hearts. And then we've also connected with other domestic violence agencies in our county to kind of see how they're doing, what they're doing. And then we've partnered or connected even with ongoing meetings that school districts have. So for instance, the last one I went to was with Capistrano down in South County. And then they were talking about just their next steps and kind of the challenges that have been coming up for their students specifically, which helped us kind of come together. For instance, that one was really helpful for a webinar that we had, again, in terms of isolation with teens. And so just connecting again with as many folks as we can that are doing similar work and working with similar populations.
I had another question. So, what have been some ways to engage or reach out to community members or folks who are limited in their access to internet and technology?
I can go. Okay, sorry. So some things, okay, so that's been an obvious challenge, and that I feel like that's an ongoing challenge too. Limited access, what we ended up doing to kind of alleviate some of that, and honestly, that's still something we're working on. But being able to post a lot of things. So we have these webinars, but obviously they're set at a specific time. But we also have a YouTube channel, so if people can get access later on, they can still have access to that webinar. So posting on our YouTube channel has been helpful, and sending that over to other to people that again work with anyone really in the community to be able to disseminate that. But I have to be honest, that's still an ongoing, trying to figure out what works and what doesn't.
Are you reaching out to schools to offer webinars to students doing distance learning? And how do you collaborate with the schools and other agencies?
So, I don't know where
I never know which one.
I was like waiting. Normally, so our booking system for presentations, we would have like, I'm not the one that like disseminates all that information, like who does the booking, but from what the knowledge that I've gathered is, from previous times that we've been getting booked, so we have the email, the contact information from those previous teachers and faculty and other organizations that would book us. So we would send out like an email blast to them and say, hey, like, just so you know, like if you're still wanting a presentation, we are still offering them, we're doing it online. And then giving them the opportunity to say like, okay, do you want us to host it? Do you want to host it? How do you want to organize all this? So having that flexibility and being able to figure out like what works best. And this was like in the beginning. So I guess, and for a while, the teachers were taking a while to respond to because they didn't even know what was going on. Sorry, I'm just going back to the message. So just like the email blast, the initial email blast, but more recently, it had been like Yanira was mentioning, just like that personal connection, and instead of the email blast and reaching out, I know that I ended up presenting for this summer orientation program at UCI, because I actually personally know the folks that were coordinating that particular training. So it was very helpful to just have, to know folks that were in need of certain trainings and education. So it all depends, if you'll have the capacity to be able to send the email blast or even more personal emails definitely help. And that's ultimately why we also transition to the weekly platforms or the weekly series, so that folks can connect with us and they know, okay, that's something that's gonna for sure happen this week at this particular time.
And just to let folks know, I've put the Building Bridges During Teen Dating Violence Awareness document. It was put together looking at talking with a number of our coalition members and partners on how they stay connected or how they connect with members in their community. So we thought that might be helpful for folks to take a look at, and it will be sent in the follow-up email as well. We have a couple of other questions. So what are some of the ways that you keep students engaged during Zoom calls?
We smile. That's a great question. I think Andrew and I have had pretty similar experiences when it comes to this. Sometimes it feels like you're just speaking to a screen, to be honest. So it kind of just depends. But I feel like our presentations are interactive in person, but it's kind of harder to do that on the screen. But I've had times where I've had students come up with questions still relating to the topic, and this kind of goes back to meeting people where they are. We have this curriculum set up and we have topics we want to cover, but sometimes, you know, you do have to be flexible with that. And sometimes they want to really talk about jealousy and what that means in the relationship and really spend more time on that. And that's okay. And having them kind of lead the conversation helps, because if one person has that experience, then another person might chime on that. And so that's kind of been my experience personally with some students who have had specific concerns, and that's why they're even on that conversation, because we open up those webinars for anyone, and so they really had specific questions, and really bringing that up to them and letting them guide that too.
I feel like for me too, just in terms of getting the participation, I kind of like do like my little disclaimer in the beginning, be like, please, I like kind of plead with them, please use the chat. It's like, if you don't want to talk, like I just please, like just, you know, and I think just being more like being very, and I think that's the point that you hit on too, is like the redefining professionalism piece is like, you know, we don't have to be, and I'm sure like most preventionists like can relate to this, but you know, you don't have to be giving presentations, you know, very, you know, I kind of like talking down to folks, kind of like you said, meeting people where they are and kind of being personal, being yourself, and being able to show your personality, and you know, just so that they feel comfortable, because it's easy to be, you know, to just participate or just to sit there and just watch everything happening. So just really encouraging folks to utilize the chat when they can, and to, you know, kind of shift certain activities to make it more like, you know, just how it would normally be, but just using technology. So some of the ways is just, you know, obviously using the chat box. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Andrew's pop figures have sometimes been a conversation.
Yeah, it could be like, conversation starters, you know, like, you know, people are like, you know, at one point, sorry, I share stories a lot, because the way I talk, the way I present, you know, the way I present myself, is not the most like contemporary or the most like traditionally like professional way of like speaking, and so people in the chat box would say things like, oh my god, I think he's like either an earth sign or like a fire sign, and then I would just like see these in the chat box and I would interject and be like, actually I'm a Cancer. So and it's just, you know, just to kind of like to break the ice or to break that wall, just so that folks can feel more comfortable, and you know, have and really again building that community, making folks feel a little bit more like, you know, that they're in the room, being present and stuff.
And there was a question on how is your agency supporting clients in emergency rooms when you respond to a call of sexual assault or domestic violence, and are you responding physically to the call or virtually?
With our agency, we're a domestic violence agency, and some of the services specifically that we offer in terms of emergency is our emergency shelter. So with that, we actually have safety net in place. Safety net is basically some hotels that we are in partnership with, and so for instance, with COVID specifically, it would be before all this, I forget how many days. I believe it was like 2 days up until someone can come back. Sorry, rewind. So staff would meet with our client at Safety Net, and they would be there for like a day or two. But now, due to COVID, they're there for an extended amount of time due to safety reasons. And so that's kind of how we've responded in that way. But again, that's the only emergency part that we have in terms of our shelter. But we also have a 24-hour hotline number. So our 24-hour hotline number is still going. And actually, all of our services and programs are already, you know, connected with our 24-hour hotline number, but all of the calls, because we're not in the office, are going to our 24-hour hotline number. And then that's when they do the intake or whatever referral process that they need to do. And then they give that over to the respective departments. I hope that helps.
Yeah. So I'm going to shift this over so that we can make sure we have time for everyone to share, and then come back to the questions and be able to have a robust conversation. So thank you so much. And I want to invite, I can't talk today. I invite the team from SAVE to come on board, and who would like to share slides so that I can make you a co-host?
I can.
Okay. You should be able to share now.
All right, were you all seeing that? Can you all see our slides?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, let's see. What do I need to do? All right, share screen. There we go. Okay, here you go. Sorry, everyone. My name is Melissa Espinosa. I'm the Youth Services Program Manager at SAVE. My pronouns are she and her. I'll let my team introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. I'm Maya Granera, and I am the Youth Services Prevention Advocate, and my pronouns are she and hers.
Hi everyone, my name is Ruby Perez and I am the Youth Services Program Coordinator, and my pronouns are also she, hers.
Great. Well, thank you all for being here, and thanks Miranda for giving us an opportunity to talk about our project. So we're located in Fremont. Let's do this. We're a part of Alameda County. We're at pretty much at the end. We're in the southern end of the county. Our community is pretty much made up of a very affluent immigrant community. SAVE was there. You know, we started back in 1976 as a SAVE home, and we've turned into a domestic violence agency. So we provide similar services to your typical DV agency. We have a 24-hour crisis line. We have an empowerment center for crisis support services. So basically, someone can just do any walk-in service and meet with one of our clients. We have a 30-bed emergency safe house. We have the DV funding, DV Housing First funding to support our clients. We also provide counseling services. We have a children's program. We have our community-oriented prevention services that are stationed at different police departments. So we're stationed in 5 cities in the county. And we also provide 40-hour training and a volunteer program in the community, as well as our youth services program, which we're here to talk to you about today. So I just wanted to add a couple of things of how we've changed up our work in terms of SAVE based on the changes with COVID, right? We had to do a lot of changes. So we've taken everything virtually. We are providing services. We're still open. And pretty much all of our services are still the same. We are letting the community know that we're still there by posting constantly in our social medias, creating videos in different languages to let folks know that we're there, creating content to provide friends and family support tips for loved ones who may be experiencing abuse or just in a harmful relationships, giving them tips on how to identify warning signs, etc. So we're just using our platforms to really engage the community in some education, and also just to support during this time, because we know how hard it is. We're also doing a lot of more personal check-ins, especially with our clients. We know right now being sheltered maybe with their abuser or sheltered with their children is a really hard time. So we're doing some intentional check-ins, creating spaces where we can have a space and time each week to just engage and be honest, and also do some mindfulness, deep breathing, or other activities. So we have someone who works with our families that we work with. Aside from that, we're also providing in-person and teletherapy services, so our counseling services can happen virtually or in person if they need to. And we also provide virtual support groups for our community. And they're in Spanish and English. We all are also currently, we're actually working in developing a podcast. So we're working right now on creating materials for adults and for youth. And hopefully we'll have that by the end of next month. So we're hoping June to be rolling this out for our community, just to talk about different, just different topics, and, to, again, just continue that education in the community. Personally, for our team, like I said, we're the youth services team. So we've been doing a lot of like one-on-one contact with our point of contacts. We have newsletters. So we're just constantly providing folks that we work with just like more materials that they can work with, so that they have something that they can continue reading, that they can gain some knowledge on, and that they can ask us if they need some more support around. Additionally, we took our campaigns virtually, especially for Denim Day, and I'll just let Maya talk about that in a little bit. So yeah, our youth services program, we started back in 2005. We were a small team, like any prevention team. We were a small team of one. We are growing actually this summer. We got the SD funding, so we'll be growing to 6 later this year. So we're really excited. Right now it's the Mighty Three, Maya, Ruby, and myself. And our prevention work, like I said, we're in Alameda County. We don't only serve Fremont, we actually work in different cities. Our reach goes as far as 33 communities. So we really try to expand services, because not a lot of people are doing prevention services. So we definitely like to, if someone asks for a presentation, we love to, if we can, cater to that request. I guess a little bit about our prevention work. SAVE really, with the help of our old ED, Yasi Safina Davis, she was a big preventionist at heart, and really made intentional work so that our youth services program and our prevention work is seen as important as our direct service work. So we've really intertwined our work with our regular day-to-day work with SAVE. So, by doing trainings with our staff, having staff be part of programming that is part of the prevention work. So it's just really making sure that prevention is also seen as a value for the agency. So before we go into like our things that we've changed, we want to kind of talk about a little bit of like what our work looks like before we had to make all these changes. We do have kind of like a philosophy. A lot of the work obviously is all youth centric. Everything that we do is to support that our youth and center them at. We also do a lot of our work. Everything is with a harm and trauma-informed lens, harm and reduction and trauma-informed lens, non-binary language. We definitely do a lot of sex-positive work, and most of our work that you'll see is really taking bold approaches. We really try to move away from focusing on scary parts of being victim blaming, or putting the responsibility on potential victims, and really our approach is to work with people and with youth, embrace them and engage them so that they understand that they might be having or demonstrating harmful behavior. So we definitely do that in our work. So I'll let Maya talk about our curricula topics.
Okay, so we have a pretty cool like setup, I would say, in terms of how much we're able to offer. Typically, we moved into, for presentations for our high schools, we moved into a model where we are doing 3 days, and we are working with schools that are willing to request 3-day presentations, so that way we can do more intentional work and build more rapport with their young people. So I'm just going to go over some of the topics that we talk about. So our first presentation, kind of our baseline, is a 101. We talk about warning signs, we talk about the cycle of violence, we go over teen dating violence and what it is, and we really strive to make sure that everyone has a clear understanding of what healthy characteristics look like, unhealthy characteristics, and what abusive characteristics look like in a relationship. And at this part, at the end of this presentation, we also talk about their rights after 12 years old, and we talk about some resources for them. One of our next kind of more popular presentations is our healthy relationships presentation. And in that presentation, we talk about deal breakers. We have youth talk about and think about, once again, you know, what is really important to them in a relationship, what are qualities that are important to them, and we go over our equality wheel. We also talk to them about breakups. We talk to them about different conflict scenarios, and they're able to kind of navigate a conflict that a couple's going through and really figure out what the best solutions are. And ultimately, for some of these scenarios, the best outcome is a breakup. So that kind of leads us into our breaking up discussion. And then another one of our really popular ones is our consent and boundaries presentation. In this presentation, we go over the 4 C's of consent. We go over boundaries, and we have youth discuss like their own boundaries. We, in the virtual presentations, it's been kind of interesting because there's like pauses that we make in order for people to be able to give, I guess, feedback to their class. So that's definitely been interesting in like an adaptation with these presentations. We also talk about refusing, delaying, and negotiating in this presentation. We talk about how to get help for yourself, how to get help for a friend. And we really want to make sure that people feel comfortable expressing boundaries and having conversations about consent after this presentation's over. Another one of our presentations is gender stereotypes. So this is where we're really talking about those societal norms. We're talking about emotional impact of physical and verbal consequences of not being able to live in these certain boxes. And we also talk about how that in turn can create harm in relationships. We have another presentation, which is about victim blaming and why survivors stay. And so with this presentation, we're really able to give our young people a perspective of why someone would stay, because typically after our 101, they'll have a lot of questions as to why is this person staying, if you know that these things aren't okay. So with this presentation, we really like to give them the perspective of, you know, these are the different reasons why someone might stay. And we also give them insight on what victim blaming looks like. We have them do some activities around victim blaming and identifying victim blaming phrases. And we also talk to them about how to help a friend and how best to support someone that's experiencing harm in a relationship. So that's our first page of topics. We have another one. So the top 3 on this slide are the remainders of our high school curriculum. And then the bottom 3, when I get to those are our junior high curriculum. So the first one at the top, connect and disconnect, that is talking about online dating. So we're able to really brainstorm with our youth what online dating looks like. you know, if you were to, we have them imagine, you know, creating a dating profile. What things do you want someone to see? What things do you think is important for someone to see? What things do you want to keep more private? And we also have them brainstorm, like, what things do you need to see on someone else's page? What things kind of validate that this person is real? We also talk about safety. So like the first meetup with this person, with this new person in your life that you've met online, the first meetup. So what are the best ways that you can take care of yourself? Thinking about your digital safety. And we also think about, you know, what online boundaries look like, because hopefully by this point they've had some boundary work. They've hopefully had consent and boundaries, or they are a little bit familiar with boundaries. So we typically go over boundaries and then we talk about their online boundaries. So do you want to share your social media passwords with your partner? Do you want to share your login information to certain things with your partner? Different things like that. And we also talk about, you know, sometimes it doesn't work out. So what are ways that you can end something in a safe and healthy way that's still respectful? And we also talk about, you know, if things become unsafe, and you start to feel that your well-being is at risk, what are some ways that you can best take care of yourself in those situations? One of our newer presentations is safer sexting. So with safer sexting, we're able to kind of use a harm reduction lens to talk about what sexting looks like for people. Where, you know, a lot of times when we go in and talk about this, people are really scared to request this presentation just because they're like, I don't want you to promote sexting with my students. But, you know, we're taking the approach of, let's make sure that there are healthy ways and healthy approaches to talk about these things and have these conversations. So that way, in turn, you know, young people know that they have someone to talk to, right? They know what's okay and what's not okay in these different situations. So we talk about like navigating sexual exploration. We also talk about healthy community responses. So when things kind of go bad, right? If somebody exposes their partner's photos, if somebody does these different things, what are some ways that a community can respond that's healthy? What are some ways that a community can respond that's unhealthy? And what are some harmful ways that a community can respond? So we talk about all those things, and then we also talk about how, like, taking accountability. So if you are someone who has exposed your partner's photos, things that you can do, and if you have had your photos exposed, things that you can do for self-care, and like different legal things that you can do to try to take care of yourself. One of our little workshop presentation is DV in the media. This one we are currently, we have been in the process of kind of thinking about new ways to adapt this presentation, but this presentation is really talking about like having media literacy and being able to identify what harm looks like in movies, right? In all these different forms of media, in music, on social media platforms, being able to identify that these things aren't okay. And so we go through various clips of movies, we go through ads, like Super Bowl commercial ads, we go through music videos and song lyrics. And so students are really able to pinpoint and identify by the end of this presentation, in these various forms of media, this is where we could see the harm happening, and we're able to connect it back to our 101 presentation in like, what warning signs are you seeing? Are you seeing the cycle of violence happening at all in these different multimedia platforms? So this is kind of our workshop one, but it's definitely a fun one. So our junior high curriculum is pretty new. We have 3 days for each of the grades. So we have 3 days for 6th grade, 3 days for 7th grade, and 3 days for 8th grade. For our 6th grade presentation, I'm just kind of going to give you an idea of what each day looks like, what the topics are for each day. So for the first day of 6th grade, we are talking about communication and conflict. We are talking about, ways that you communicate when you're in a good mood, ways that you communicate when you're in a bad mood. And we're really having students kind of navigate a scenario where conflict is happening and identifying red flags. So they're kind of starting to get some ideas of what is okay in a relationship and what's not okay. And they're starting to kind of lay their base for future presentations, for future conversations that we have, because the idea for these presentations is that each time in 6th grade, they'll get all 3, and then in 7th grade, they'll get another 3 that are going to build on the previous year's presentations. So for our 2nd day, we have communication pathways and multiple feelings. And then for our 3rd day of 6th grade presentations, we talk about hot buttons and we talk about calming strategies. In 7th grade, we really start to talk a little bit more about dating. We talk about friendships and dating. So really paving the way for what do you want in a friend and what do you want in a relationship. So that's where they start to get this conversation of kind of thinking about what you would want in a partner. We also talk about gender stereotypes and we talk about dating violence. And then for our 3rd day of 7th grade, we talk about healthy relationships. So this is kind of a more scaled down version of our high school healthy relationships presentation. And it's more adapted to meet the needs of our younger youth. For our 8th grade presentations, we are really building on those ideas that students have already gotten in the 2 previous years, and we're talking about consent and boundaries on the first day. So this, once again, is an adapted version of our high school consent and boundaries to meet the needs of our younger youth. Then for the 2nd day, we talk about a heart exercise and we talk about hearing no and saying no. And then for the 3rd day, we talk about getting together and breaking up. So, we talk about ending things and what that can look like. And we also talk about, when we talk about breaking up, we try to do our best in like taking away the stigma of breaking up, and letting them know that sometimes a breakup is necessary. Sometimes these are things that are going to happen and it's kind of inevitable, right? And it might be the best for you and your partner. So those are all our presentations in a pretty long kind of nutshell.
Thanks, Maya. Yeah, we have a very comprehensive programming that we offer our the schools that we work with. So why we're here to talk about, right? Why did we go virtual with our presentations? Because of the pandemic, right? We wanted to continue serving our community and supporting them. So we wanted to continue to provide that service. We knew we were able to record and had that ability. We have Zoom, and we knew that we could, send them out and some people would be receptive to it. But I guess to give some background, during this time, we were actually in our program going through some transition. We had our program coordinator who had left, maybe I think it was like 2 weeks prior to save working remotely. We already had a full schedule of presentations that she had scheduled our team to be on. So we were trying to figure out how we were going to meet all of those presentation requests with just the support of Maya. Maya's not full time. So we were really just trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to be able to meet the needs and the requests that we already said we were going to do. And then, we had to close down especially our district, because we were scheduled during that time with most of our school district. They took a whole month to really figure out what they were going to do. So they were just kind of in hiatus, like paused. So that gave us some time to really, for us as a team, to think about, okay, what do we want to do? So I talked to Maya and I was like, okay, we're going to do virtual presentations. But in the middle of all of that, I was also looking to hire for a coordinator, which we brought in Ruby. And so Ruby's only been here for about 2 months almost. So she really hit the ground running because she would have to get trained on our presentations. and then, you know, be able to support with creating the work that follows these presentations. So I'll let Ruby talk about that a little bit more.
Sorry, I started talking and I forgot to unmute myself. I just assumed I already did it. So what was unique about our situation is that Melissa and I had worked together on other projects before, and we had recently worked on a training together. So we had already figured out that our work styles were very similar. So when I came on board, it was a very natural drag and drop process, but I want to highly and humbly emphasize that this only worked out the way that it did because we already knew each other and we knew that we had both been in the field for several years. This is not something that I would recommend for someone who is very green, is to go into this situation where you have to edit previous presentations, learn it, and then also start recording and turn it out into the community. So this was a very strange, but very fast and just kind of roll with it kind of situation. And it only worked out as well as it did because we had already established that relationship.
Definitely. So yeah, between the time that Ruby came on, 2 weeks later, we were rolling out presentations to our community. So it was a fast turnaround, but, you know, I'm happy that, you know, our team, we all worked together. This was really a team effort. That's why when Miranda asked me, I was like, I can't talk about this alone because it wasn't just me. It was really my whole team's effort that we were able to create all these virtual presentations. Okay, so.
Okay, so to kind of elaborate a little bit further, what we did with our virtual presentations and what we're talking about when we're talking about the 2-week turnaround, a lot went into this. So what we decided to do with our virtual presentations isn't to just do live Zoom calls, not to knock that down for anybody, but what we felt would be good for our community is to come up with a virtual packet for our community educators to be able to have access to. So in this packet, we have included a recorded presentation of their choice. So whatever it was that they had already previously signed up to have, so whether it was the Healthy Relationships 101 or what the Safer Sexting presentation, whatever it was that they had signed up for, we made that a priority to go through those presentations, revise, tweak a little bit, whatever we could so that we could record this, change the activities, and we recorded ourselves just talking to the screen. So we relate to that feeling because we were talking to screens for several hours, but on our end, we didn't have someone on the other end because we were legitimately talking to a screen, going through the activities with nobody, but recording ourselves so that we can be able to distribute these presentations. Along with those presentations in this virtual packet that we have on Google Drive are handouts and youth resources that we would normally give them during our presentations anyway. And what was new for these packets is that we created a follow-up questionnaire and discussion guides, and then we kind of redid our activities. So with some of our presentations, for all of our presentations, we came up with questionnaires that students can answer, kind of like an informal quiz, just to kind of see what they gained out of the presentations. But for one presentation in particular, our Teen Dating Violence 101, we came up with a complete discussion guide for our educators to go through. And it was designed for the educators in mind, the ones that wanted to have these conversations themselves with the youth, but maybe felt like they needed a little bit more assistance with it, or didn't feel like they were given the adequate tools for them to be able to have these discussions without us being present. So it kind of looks like a script. If they say this, you can answer with that type of thing. So it's very comprehensive, it's very in-depth, and it's meant to be an aid to whoever wants to have these conversations so that they can facilitate that conversation on their own time. We also included a program evaluation because data is important. That's how we get our funding. And then we also included all of this into one Google Drive, and then we sent that out in an email to all of our educators when the time came for us to send them out. And in that email, we included instructions on what to look out for, what to expect, how to use it, and tips that we have come up with for them to be able to facilitate these conversations amongst themselves. Because what we have learned is that depending on which community they're a part of or where their school is, they're operating differently. So some schools are putting up assignments on Google Drive and just telling students they're due Friday, and others are having set times where they can talk to their students. So this made it so that they can kind of adjust, plug and drop wherever their model was, so that if they wanted to assign it to students and tell them to listen to the recording, they can. And if they wanted to screen it together and have those conversations as a classroom, they can also do that.
Thank you. So we're going to move into kind of talking about we have two major, aside from our presentations, we have we're funded through Cal OES's TV program. So during this time, we had a lot of things that affected this group, and I'll let Maya talk about it because she's the one that's leading this leadership class. And then we also have our own youth empowerment group at SAVE, which is called Team Stronger Than You Think, and which was also impacted. So Ruby will be talking about that shortly. So I just want to give you guys a little glimpse of like, what does it look like before? What does it look like after and during?
Okay, so I work with the youth leadership class, and they're a really great group. They are, the school itself is only 7th and 8th graders, so that's typically what my class consists of. My current group is 24 youth leaders, so it's a little bit of a smaller group. I'm used to having about 30 students in the leadership classes, and typically this is kind of just like week to week. We would meet for an hour weekly. So I would meet with them Mondays, see them, and Jesse Rhodes, our leadership teacher, he is really pretty awesome. He is able to, if I ask him to send out an email blast to the teachers, if I ask him to get something put on School Loop for a leadership event that's coming up, he's really great about doing those things and really advocating for his class when events are coming up, when things really need to get done. So it's really, really awesome to have someone that is so supportive, kind of in the background working with us as well. And so our youth leadership group, we have 2 cohorts. So in a year, I'll have 2 sets of students. And it's a pretty weird transition. So they will switch semesters in the middle end of January. So then come TDV month, I will have a whole new group of youth, and they kind of just hit the ground running. So this year, we were able to do 21 days of healthy relationships, and they were able to do 2 different events. They were able to, each week they put up posters around the school, and the posters consisted of like a weekly topic, a weekly question, like a question to discuss with your friends, a question to discuss with your class, with someone around you. And it also talked about like what they could do to get involved that week. So, on Valentine's Day, we actually had a Valentine's Day booth event kind of thing, and it was really great. The youth leaders wanted to have some of their peers make cards for clients that are in our safe house. So we had a whole bunch of our youth at the school making cards for our clients at our safe house. And so it was really cool because they were making cards for our clients, for their kids, for just our whole kind of safe house. So it was really, really awesome to be able to see kind of how their their ways of thinking and how they want to get really everyone in their school involved. And then to close out the month, we actually had kind of our big event, our big lunchtime event, and it typically consists of about 5 to 6 booths, and each of the students are sign up for a booth, and they are all responsible for creating what their peers are going to be learning. So it's based off of things that we've talked about. It's based off of conversations that we are currently in the middle of having. And so they really kind of run the show. So it's pretty cool. And April is also one of our really big months for campaigning. But we have had to kind of change some things because obviously we went on the shelter in place in March. So I wasn't able to see them for a while, just while the school was getting adapted to going online. So now actually one of the positives for having gone online is I get more time with them. I get a full hour, whereas I was only getting like 50 minutes before. So it's pretty cool. I get a full hour with them now. And yeah, so our leadership teacher, he's really good about coordinating and having students know what time class is going to be, and that class is going to be this day or this day. So this week we had to change it to Wednesday since obviously Monday was a holiday. But it's really flexible in how we can work things around. And so for SAM month, the youth leaders were able to participate by submitting their own kind of personally designed ribbons. So we encouraged them to design a ribbon. I did some lessons with them around, what SAM month is, what it means, why it's important, and all that stuff. And so they were able to create a ribbon, and some of them had some really cool designs. And with the ribbon designing kind of activity, we encourage them to work with someone else in their house, so a parent or a sibling, or just to work on it on their own. So we got some really, really cool designs there. And we were posting on social media a lot, because it was harder to really get so much engagement from our young people. We wanted to kind of use a platform that we knew that they use a little bit more. So we went on social media and we were doing daily posts. We were talking about, what consent is. So that was all really fun, and it was really cool to be able to do that and kind of take it virtually and still have kind of an impact on our young people and on our community in general. So one cool thing that really came out of our online lessons together, because we do Zoom meetings. So one of the really cool things that came out of that is that my leadership class was able to be kind of a part of finalizing their own school's teen dating violence policy. So Melissa got on and, went through the policy with them. And it's really cool because they're able to kind of give their feedback and give their input in those conversations and say, hey, I don't understand that. Hey, I think that's confusing, so it's really cool because we're trying to make this policy as for them as possible. So that way there's no confusion when they're reading it. They know what they're reading and they know that it's there, so they know it's something like a resource that they kind of have. And the leadership class has also, I've been able to go through some of our presentations with them. So we are finishing up a conversation about consent and boundaries soon. And we've also been able to talk about TDV, and we've been able to talk about friendships and dating. And it's pretty cool because with our junior high curriculums, they've been able to kind of give a lot of feedback and say, okay, well, I think that works well. I think we should move this there. So it's been really, really fun to be able to do that. And also, I just want to kind of throw this in because I know how these things have been adapted has been coming up a lot. So with the presentations, I've been kind of just adding in different things where they can give their input in the chat box into the presentation. So for consent and boundaries, there's a boundaries activity where they are kind of picking one boundary or the other. They're picking what feels comfortable for them. So I put like 1, 2, 3, right? And they got to kind of pick like 1 is what feels more comfortable for me, 2 is what feels more comfortable for me. So just things like that. Just kind of throw that in there.
Thanks, Mai. Okay, team stronger than you think.
Okay, so I'm going to apologize in advance because of my over-the-top enthusiasm. I have been working for prevention for 4 years, and this is still my bread and butter. And this is my new baby. So Team Stronger Than You Think is a group of 13 high school leaders, and they are between the 9th to 12th grade, and each of them have exemplified leadership skills in their own community. As we have mentioned before, Fremont is a very affluent community, but also they are very academic heavy. So a lot of our students by default are part of other clubs, they're part of other sports, and they have a very compact heavy schedule. So as a result, a lot of our youth leaders, actually every single one of them, is involved in a lot of other activities that have shown them a lot of neat leadership skills and accountability. So these are some A-straight, like headstrong leadership students. They're kind of like the example in their own community. They meet bi-weekly for 2 hours, and they go through a series of workshops, and they assist with editing our curriculum. This is what keeps our curriculum current and also youth-centric. This is also how we as facilitators learn what's going on in their classrooms, what's going on their campuses, and what slang is cool to use, because that changes every 10 minutes. So it helps us also build that connection with our other students when we do other presentations. And the big piece that they are very proud of is that they also work, they plan, and they execute our annual youth summit called the Symbiosis. Maya, do you want to just elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, so Symbiosis, it's our youth summit. It's actually a pretty cool event. We're able to hold it for all of our youth. We encourage it to be a very youth-centered space. So we have people that come, and we have presenters that come and speak on various topics. We have someone that talks about activism, using rap as a form of activism. We talk about gender stereotypes. We talk about healthy relationships. We have someone come in and talk about dating as a second generation teen. So we really make it to where it's an all-day event, and youth are able to come and have these conversations surrounding like various things with healthy relationships and LGBTQ plus topics as well, and having all those conversations in a safe space and being able to really be free to be themselves in these spaces and ask questions. So we encourage all of our youth to come, and it's actually a really, really fun thing. We had our 3rd annual one this past February.
Yeah, so as we mentioned before, this team is very involved in a lot of what we do in our programs, and we like to give them a lot of autonomy over the program and what the Stronger Than You Think model will look like. So what we spend quite a bit of time and what we're starting to dive into is workshops and making sure that they have a clear and strong understanding of everything that is teen dating violence and all of its intersectionalities, whether it's with the LGBTQ community, what it looks like in other communities, how we can be assistant, and then we also touch on consent, those type of factors, because we want them to be able to have these conversations whether we are in the room or not. So that's where we're trying to work towards, is making sure that they can lead these discussions and have presentations, talk about these conversations without us actually having to be present. So that is what we are aiming towards. So because our program, because I just came on board and we had a little bit of a staff turnaround, there was some unique challenges in addition to the pandemic flipping everything on its lid. Like everything had to flip upside down. But because of the other factors, there was a lot of challenges that were like there when I came on board. For example, we had staff changes, and it happened to happen just as the pandemic was happening and we all got put into shelter in place. So I came into this space being very well aware that these students felt like one day they were in school and they were part of like 2 to 3 clubs and teams, and they had a really cool coordinator running STYT. And then overnight, this leader is gone and they're no longer being a part of those other activities and everything. So we didn't know how much involvement we would get from the students, how much they would want to stay with STYT, or Stronger Than You Think. So another additional factor is that we mentioned before, Fremont School District was a little late to the game. They took a little while to figure out what they were going to do. So their classes were not in session, programs were not running, activities were canceled, and that kind of puts a damper on our youth leaders. It makes it to where they may not feel as peppy and as enthusiastic about other programs and other activities as they used to, because they're still mourning the loss of all these other things. Also, when I came on board, they were going into spring break. So even though they were home, now they really didn't have to do anything because it's spring break. This was already on the calendar. So because this is an affluent community, we knew that normally they go on vacation, and now they're also not going on vacation. They're not doing all these other activities. So it adds just another layer of stuff that it kind of makes it challenging. And because they were on spring break, we also knew most students don't want to participate in these kind of activities when they're supposed to be on vacation. So we also had to kind of gauge that as well. And then because of all of these other external factors, we really didn't know how many of our youth leaders were going to want to stay a part of our team. It almost felt like there was no point to some of them because they didn't have the old coordinator. They don't know this new person that is coming on board. And all of these other things are just not the same. So we didn't really know what we were getting ourselves into. We didn't know if we were going to have 3 youth leaders show up or all 13 of them. So it was really cool to see that during our first Zoom meeting, all of them turned up. It was very, very cool to see. So I'm not going to call this part of where we are on our journey a new chapter or a new journey. I have been calling this our metamorphosis because this is a group that was already there. They were already doing this work and they were already engaging in these conversations. We're just transitioning and changing the program. So instead of calling it a new chapter, I'm going to call it our metamorphosis. So one of the first things I did when I came on board, because I knew of all these external factors, and already it's challenging to have a stranger come into this space to have these challenging conversations, I sent out a get to know me bio before I even talked to them. So what it looks like was just kind of like a resume, but it was very informal. So there was some about me's, like my previous work experience, but it was also what I'm into, what my quirks are. And there was even a section on there where I asked my friends to talk about what they thought was unique about me that they maybe someone who works closely with me would need to know. So I took direct quotes and I put that on there, and I wanted it to be informal because I wanted them to see me as another person, as their equal, instead of a stranger coming into this space trying to run things. So that seemed to be very successful, and we think that's part of the reason why a lot of youth decided to stay with us, is because they were intrigued to get to know this weirdo that just sent out like a very vulnerable page to everyone. So we set aside a couple of Zoom meetings to talk about their experiences. We wanted them to be genuinely honest with us, and I asked them to tell us, what is it that keeps you part of the group? What is it that wants that keeps coming every week that you would like for me to keep bringing into this space. So every one of their suggestions that they brought up, we made sure that we kept it as part of the group. So one of the things that they asked for is that we do weekly check-ins, even if we're not having meetings, that I text them to check and see that everyone is doing well with their mental health. So I might do that, or I might send a TikTok video, just kind of letting them know, like, hey, this is the, in April, when we did Denim Day, I sent them a TikTok video about what Denim Day is. And we did that sort of thing. And that kind of gauged students to kind of think like, okay, this isn't an outdated adult, like we can talk to this person. So after we kind of at least got them to be a little bit curious and interested in what this program will look like and what this weirdo that's coming into the space is like, we set up one-on-ones, so that we can build a little bit more on that rapport while we are away. And also, so that if any one of them felt like they wanted to share about their experiences, whether it was positive or negative in the group, that they could do it in a safe space if they didn't feel like they could while we were in a big group setting. And a lot came out of those conversations, both in the group and in the one-on-ones. What we learned and what was reiterated to us several times is that they wanted to do a lot more than they were doing. So they felt like they were learning about teen dating violence, but they didn't feel like they were engaging enough in the community. So we started talking about doing an orientation for them, so that if we were going to do tablings in the community, that they can be well set up. Again, going back to being able to have those conversations without us being there. I mean, we're going to be there, but it comes off a little bit more powerful when a youth is talking about youth programs and their problems versus an adult talking about it. I can gauge my baby face, but that's being dishonest. So let's not do that. So we went about it with that approach. But I did see that someone asked, like, how do you keep youth engaged during Zoom calls? Well, again, we got a little creative with it. So because we have 13 youth and all of them are very different and we don't know each other very well, and some of them were friends with each other from school, but others still were new and had to get to know each other, we played a Jeopardy game. So what we did is that same bio that I sent out, I asked them to make their own and send it to me. And I didn't care how they made it, if it was a resume style or if it was a PowerPoint or if they did a video, however they wanted to do it, just as long as it was an accurate representation of who they are. And I gave them categories of what they needed to include. So what they didn't know was that each one of those categories was going to become a category in the Jeopardy game. So we were learning about each other as we were playing Jeopardy. But one thing that we made sure to add is one tile, one section of it, we made it a wild card, and that was more of us trying to quiz them on teen dating violence. So there was questions about like, what are examples of a healthy relationship? And this was how we were able to gauge where they were at while also getting to know them and building our rapport together. In our one-on-ones, we asked them to do a tiny teach so that we can also reiterate to them that although I'm supposedly the expert in this field, they are the experts in theirs as well. So there's a lot that we can learn back and forth. So we brought tiny teach as a part of our meetings as well. And every session we open up with a highs and lows because we want them to know that we care, not just about how much they're bringing into this space and what we're getting out of them, but also who they are as a person. Because as we mentioned before, Fremont is very academic heavy, so these students are under a lot of stress. So we want to make sure that when they're coming into this space, that they're feeling in a good headspace. And if not, maybe we can, as a group, as a collective group, to come together and debrief one way or the other. Maybe it was finals week, and a lot of our students are taking AP testing. So that's overwhelming. So we kept the highs and lows per their request. And what we are doing in about 2 weeks is that this week we were going to be doing a workshop on kind of talking a little bit further, diving on teen dating violence. And as their homework, I hate giving them homework, but as their homework. We're asking them to do something they're already doing, and it's watching Netflix. And just asking them to, like, hey, while you're watching whatever show that is you're watching, take note of the things that you're noticing. And maybe send me the episode and at what minute that came up so that I can watch it. I can take the time to see it. And in 2 weeks, when we have our next meeting, or in our second meeting, because we have one this week, the following week, we will be talking about the clips that they submitted to us. So we'll be watching the shows and the clips that they submit and talking about it and how it is that we can bring these discussions in our own classrooms, in our own spaces, because this is content that they're already consuming. So how about we make some good out of it? And with that, we're piloting a lot of our new workshops and a lot of the new presentations that we've been working on during this pandemic with the Stronger Than You Think students. They're the ones that kind of tell us, like, hey, this is great content, I love it, or this sucks, this is how we can tweak it. So they are very comfortable with telling us what's working and what's not, and that's how we keep things current. So that's what we're going to be working on together. And eventually we're going to be working on orientation training so that they can feel comfortable having these discussions when we're not present, because that's the ultimate goal. So we cannot say that we are youth-centered if we are going to do a presentation on our youth-centered program without bringing a youth voice. Unfortunately, we were not able to have a youth on this call today, but we did ask them if they wanted to participate to submit a quote to us. So Zara is one of our, like, stellar rock star leaders. We were talking about having a youth be a part of our board, and this person was unanimously voted to be a part of that if we were to ever pilot that. So Zara says, we asked them to talk about what their feelings are about this new direction since we edited everything, since we changed things up because of the pandemic. And Zara says, I'm really happy about the direction that STYT is going in with doing more community outreach. Also being able to educate ourselves further to help others and grow from where we are now after being with STYT for close to 2 years, making this kind of progress exciting. I can't wait to have more people know about us and the cause to help end teen dating violence.
Thank you for closing us off. So we're leaving here our information. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. You can follow us on our social media. With that, I'll stop share.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. And we do have our other presenters as well. So I was going to open it up to, I recognize we've gone over, so if folks have just a few more minutes, and if y'all don't mind me picking your brains with some of the questions that have come in, just to make sure we can get those covered. I so appreciate the work that, you know, Laura's House and Savor are doing and being able to share that. And I know there's a lot of really great work happening with other folks who are on the call. So some of the things that folks were looking at specifically for questions is when it comes to creating curriculum, presentations, activities, do folks have any recommendations for streamlining it and making it as efficient as possible? And I think you really covered how you're keeping it current and youth-centric, is really having those youth voices there and helping you to build that curricula and being able to tell you, hey, this sucks, or hey, this is awesome. And being able to take that is so huge. It's very definitely that some of the references that I would see in curricula, I was like, wow, that's like 20 years. We can't talk about that, have any connection. But what are some ways that folks have been streamlining for the virtual world?
So I feel like we covered it, but we've been doing a lot of Zoom, and we've been recording our presentations over Zoom as well. And then downloading our recordings and putting them onto a Google Doc or Google Drive. So for our presentations, they're all in one folder so that we can distribute those to educators. As for our meetings with the Stronger Than You Think leaders, we have also been meeting over Zoom, and we give them access to call in if they need to, because sometimes Wi-Fi is not necessarily an option, but also letting them have that option as well. So we let them know that they can join us virtually, like through our webcams, or they can just call in. But each one of our meetings with the youth leaders, Stronger Than You Think, is recorded so that if anyone misses it, they can always be a part of it. And also that if we made plans or they want to talk to me about like a project, that I can be held accountable as well. Because if I'm going to hold them accountable, they should be able to hold me accountable. So this is just another tool for them to make sure that like everyone is on the same page.
I think for at least from things that I've noticed or things that our agency have done to keep things a little bit more current, because I feel like for the most part, Healthy Relationships curriculum is pretty, we've maintained it and kept it pretty current, but I think especially with going on with COVID, just being very aware of like how there's different components of it, like for example, like abusive partners telling their romantic partner like, oh, like if you love me you'll go outside, like I haven't seen you in forever, like let's just go through with this. So just like adding some more contemporary examples always keeps things a little current when you talk about certain types of abuse, like verbal, emotional, and like taking advantage of people's emotional capacity during this time, and just like, you know, kind of using those specific examples with keeping it contemporary, I feel.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Andrew. We definitely do that with our curriculum. But aside from that, we just normally do evaluations for both the educators and youth that we're working with. We're always eliciting feedback from folks because, again, we want to make sure that when it comes to that summertime for our team, that we can come back together and make sure that we're updating and taking their feedback. So we're always keeping track, like, okay, these are the things we have to get to in these presentations.
One way that we started, actually, we did this, and I think it's something that we would like to continue. We have school clubs around the county, but in particular, we had a webinar about youth, and so we wanted to get their voices involved, so our youth and our young adults. So we were actually able to connect with one of our school clubs over at a local college, and so they were really interested in being a part of that webinar, and so we gave them that opportunity. we're like, yes, please do so. And so that added such a unique component to it, which was really cool, and they were really excited about it. Wanted to share with their families and stuff. And so it's a way to have them be a part of it and continue that leadership. And they were like, anytime, just let us know, we want to do more. And so I think that really helped in getting them involved too.
Another question was, how are folks converting their activities into the virtual scheme? So there's a lot of like in-person activities that folks do, and what does that look like in shifting into the virtual? And I know, Ruby, you had covered like doing the Tiny Teach and having some Zoom calls and some different activities.
For me, I try and turned everything into a game. That's kind of been my MO. If I can turn it into a game, the other through the screen, that's kind of been my go-to approach, which is why we did the About Me Jeopardy. So just kind of seeing how we can creatively keep them here. Just another tip for the Jeopardy, though, it did drag on a little bit, so we lost them by the end. But you know, if you can keep them engaged through the whole thing, like, that's great. And also, I don't think my population is a big gamer group, but you know, we were trying things.
And I think being able to recognize, like, you're going to try things out and stepping into that kind of uncomfortable space of this might work and might not, and then that being okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We recently tried out on Zoom, and I can share the template with folks, is coloring together. So you share a document in I think it's whatever form it's in. The instructions are all there because I'm not going to explain it great, but you can do annotate. So each person who's in the meeting can annotate, and then you can color the same picture. So real time, you can see everything that everybody is doing. So I thought that was a really cool activity. And of course, we tested it out with our coworkers during a meeting. How does it work, and what are some of the pitfalls?
Piggyback off of that, that is something that I made space for in our one-on-ones with the youth. I had kind of an agenda of questions I needed to get through and topics I needed to discuss, but then I set aside a specific time slot of like 10 to 15 minutes where I told them like, okay, you're a lead, it's your turn, we do what you want. So like if you want to hang up and take a nap, that's okay. But if you want to sit here and color together, like we'll do that. So I did have 2 students, the youth leaders, that were like, hey, let's play this game I heard about on Zoom together. And that was a neat experience. But that's also another way that you could build rapport and maybe learn a new skill that you could bring into one of your presentations.
Awesome. All right, thank you, everyone. I so appreciate folks staying with us, and I recognize gone over a bit, but thank you so much for sharing all of your programs, and really look forward to continuing this conversation. So we will follow up with an email hopefully later this afternoon with the recording and be able to get some information out to the folks. So thank you. Everyone has a wonderful rest of their week.